The late-night shift was dragging on at a quiet, nearly empty diner where Zoe Carter worked, exhausted but determined to make it through the final hour. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of a flickering neon sign outside, casting a dull glow on the window panes. Zoe wiped the counter mindlessly, lost in thought, when the bell above the door suddenly jingled. Expecting a tired traveler or perhaps a local in need of coffee, she looked up, only to be caught off guard. A sharply dressed man walked in, exuding confidence and wealth. His tailored suit alone could have paid her rent for a year. He carried himself like someone used to being in control, someone who didn't hear no very often. He didn't look at the menu, just ordered a black coffee in a voice that was calm but commanding. Zoe served him quietly, used to the coldness of passing strangers, but everything shifted in an instant when he reached for his wallet. A photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor, face up. Her breath caught. The woman in the photo was her mother, Evelyn Carter. A simple, warm-hearted woman who had raised Zoe alone, with no ties to the world of wealth or privilege. Zoe froze, her heart thundering. She picked up the photo with trembling hands and demanded to know where he got it. The man looked at her, truly noticing her for the first time, but quickly dismissed her question, saying she was mistaken. Then he paid and turned to leave. Panic and confusion overwhelmed Zoe. This man, this billionaire, had a photo of her mother, and he was walking away as if it meant nothing. But Zoe knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this go. Zoe's world had tilted the moment she saw her mother's photo fall from the billionaire's wallet, but it was what came next that truly unsettled her. Her voice trembled as she held up the photograph, demanding, "Where did you get this?" The man, cool, detached, lifted his gaze to meet hers for the first time. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a brief flash of recognition or maybe regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You must be mistaken," he said, taking the photo from her hands and sliding it back into his wallet like it meant nothing. Zoe's heart raced. She knew that photo. Her mother had an identical one tucked away in a box of cherished memories. Every crease, every faded edge, etched into Zoe's memory. This wasn't a mistake. But before she could protest further, the man stood, dropped a $100 bill on the counter, and turned to leave. Panic surged through her veins. He couldn't just walk away, not without telling her the truth. She scrambled from behind the counter, nearly knocking over a tray, and rushed after him. "Please, just tell me how you knew her," she called out. At the car waiting outside, the driver opened the door and the man paused. Zoe's heart leapt, hoping he'd finally explain. But instead, without emotion, he turned slightly and said, "Forget this." Then he stepped into the car, the door shut behind him, and within seconds he was gone. Left standing in the silence of the night, Zoe could barely breathe. Questions whirled in her mind, each one louder than the last. Who was he really? Why did he have her mother's picture? And more importantly, what was he trying so hard to hide? One thing was certain, she wasn't letting this go. That night Zoe didn't sleep. Her body was tired, but her mind raced with questions she couldn't ignore. The image of the billionaire's face, his cold eyes, and the photograph of her mother replayed in her thoughts like a loop she couldn't escape. Sitting at her tiny kitchen table, she opened her old laptop and began her search. She had no name, no receipt, no business card, just his face and the haunting feeling that he knew far more than he let on. She scoured online articles, searched for CEOs, real estate moguls, and high-profile businessmen, cross-referencing images and corporate profiles. Nothing. Her frustration mounted as hours ticked by with no leads, but just as she was about to give up, she found him. Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Global Enterprises, a billionaire whose face stared back at her from dozens of news articles and business profiles. It was him, no doubt. Her pulse quickened. She dug deeper, hoping for some connection to her mother. An old affair, a family photo, even a scandal. But there was nothing. No mention of Evelyn Carter, no ties to any woman who resembled her. It was as if her mother had never existed in his world. That silence spoke volumes. He hadn't just forgotten Evelyn, he had erased her. Rage simmered beneath Zoe's skin. While he built an empire and smiled for magazine covers, her mother had struggled, alone. Zoe clenched her fists. She couldn't accept this, wouldn't. The man who walked into her diner with her mother's photo had chosen to ignore her questions, to walk away. But Zoe wouldn't be so easily dismissed. She needed answers. And now that she had his name and his empire's address, she knew exactly where to start looking. Richard Lawson owed her the truth, and she was going to get it. The next morning, Zoe stood at the base of a towering glass skyscraper, Lawson Global Enterprise. The building loomed above her like a monument to power, its glossy surface reflecting the city that had always felt just out of reach. But Zoe wasn't intimidated. She had come for answers, and this time she wasn't leaving without them. She marched through the doors and approached the receptionist with steady resolve. "I need to see Richard Lawson," she said. The woman didn't even glance up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important," the receptionist sighed. "Mr. Lawson doesn't take walk-ins." Zoe had expected this. Her eyes scanned the lobby quickly, security guards by the elevators, employees flashing badges at turnstiles. There was no getting in the normal way. But then she spotted a young man, barely older than her, juggling coffee and folders, clearly distracted. She moved fast, catching up beside him. "You forgot to send me that report Mr. Lawson needed," she said sharply. Confused, he blinked. "What?" But Zoe had already timed it perfectly. She stepped forward with him as his badge activated the sensor. The guard barely noticed. She was in. Her heart thundered in her chest as the elevator rose, floor after floor, until the doors opened on the top level. Stepping out, she was greeted immediately by a man in a dark suit. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked, firm. "No," Zoe replied, lifting her chin. "But tell Richard Lawson that Evelyn Carter's daughter is here, and I'm not leaving until I see him." The man hesitated, then disappeared down a hallway. Minutes felt like hours. Then a door opened. Richard Lawson emerged, his face unreadable, but something in his eyes, resignation, maybe recognition, made Zoe stand taller. Without a word, he said, "Come with me." Inside his sleek, intimidating office, the air between them felt heavy with unspoken truths. Zoe didn't wait. As soon as the door closed, she faced Richard head-on. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her. Richard didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to his desk, opened his wallet, and gently placed the photograph on the surface between them. Zoe's eyes flicked from the worn edges of the image to the man across from her. "You knew her," she whispered. Richard nodded slowly. "I didn't just know her," he said, his voice lower now, more vulnerable. "I loved her." Zoe staggered back slightly, the weight of those words hitting her like a wave. She had come seeking answers, but wasn't prepared for this one. Richard leaned against the desk, rubbing his forehead. "I was a coward," he confessed. "My family warned me that if I stayed with Evelyn, I'd lose everything. My inheritance, the company, my future. So I walked away." Zoe's heart clenched. "You left her for money," she said, her voice sharp with anger. Richard didn't deny it. "I thought I could come back later, when everything was secure, but when I finally did, she was gone." Zoe's fists tightened. Her mother had suffered alone, raising a child with no help, while this man lived in luxury. "She never told me about you," Zoe whispered. Richard's eyes dimmed with regret. "Because she wanted to protect you from me." Silence filled the room, thick with years of lost time. Zoe turned away, her thoughts tangled. She had found the truth, but it came with pain she hadn't expected. Without another word, she left his office, unsure what to feel, only knowing that everything had changed. That night, unable to shake the weight of Richard's confession, Zoe sat alone in her apartment, the silence louder than ever. She needed answers, answers her mother had taken to the grave. Determined, she pulled out the wooden memory box Evelyn had kept for years. Inside were faded letters, small trinkets, and old photographs. Then, hidden at the bottom, her fingers brushed against a soft velvet pouch. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small engraved pendant. Forgive, love, begin. On the back was a faded photograph, a young man with Richard Lawson's eyes, and a folded note in her mother's handwriting. This belonged to your father. I kept it for you. One day you will understand. Zoe's breath caught. The truth was undeniable now. Richard Lawson wasn't just the man who abandoned her mother, he was her father. The next morning, Zoe returned to Lawson Global Enterprises. This time, she didn't sneak in. She walked straight to the receptionist, placed the pendant on the desk, and said clearly, "Tell Richard Lawson his daughter is here." Within moments, Richard appeared at the end of the hall, his expression unreadable. Inside his office, Zoe placed the necklace in front of him. "Explain this." Richard stared at it, his voice breaking as he admitted, "I didn't know. I never knew she was pregnant. If I had known about you, I never would have walked away." Zoe's heart ached. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her still burned with betrayal. "You didn't know," she echoed, "because you left." The room pulsed with silence, filled with decades of what-ifs. Finally, Richard said, "I can't change the past, but I can be here now. If you'll let me." Zoe looked down at the pendant. Her mother had left it not just as a keepsake, but as a choice. A chance. A chance. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Zoe said honestly. "Not yet." Richard nodded. "I understand." And in that moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but the beginning of possibility. Zoe stood at the entrance of Lawson Global Enterprises once more, but this time, something was different. She wasn't sneaking in or chasing after answers. She walked in with purpose, no longer searching for truth. She had found it. What remained now was choice. Inside Richard's office, the air was quiet, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. Zoe placed the pendant on the desk once more. "She kept it," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She never stopped thinking about me, did she?" Zoe nodded slowly, her voice tight. "She never stopped protecting me." Richard met her gaze, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "I won't ask for your forgiveness today, or tomorrow, but if you ever want to know me, not as Richard Lawson the billionaire, but as a man who made a terrible mistake, I'll be here." For a long moment Zoe said nothing. She searched his face, looking for arrogance or manipulation, but all she found was quiet sorrow and years of regret. Slowly, she reached for the necklace and clasped it around her neck. Her mother had left it for a reason, not to force forgiveness, but to give Zoe the power to decide. She wasn't ready to call him Dad. Not yet. But she also wasn't ready to close the door completely. As she turned to leave, her steps were steady, not heavy with anger, but thoughtful, uncertain. Some wounds, she realized, don't heal overnight. Some stories can't be rewritten, but they can be continued. Outside, the city moved around her, loud and alive. Zoe looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of the past loosen just slightly. She didn't know what came next, but maybe, just maybe, it was okay to not have all the answers yet. The future was still hers to shape. Life often leaves us with unanswered questions, broken connections, and choices we wish we could change. This story reminds us that the past, no matter how painful, doesn't have to define the future. Richard's regret over walking away from love and Zoe's courage to confront the truth echo a powerful message. It is never too late to seek reconciliation, to acknowledge our mistakes, or to open our hearts, even when years have passed. For those who've carried silent burdens or lost touch with loved ones, this story speaks directly to the soul. Forgiveness doesn't always come easily, and trust may take time to rebuild, but healing begins with honesty and intention. Evelyn's quiet strength in protecting her daughter and Zoe's willingness to listen despite the pain show that love can transcend distance, pride, and even silence. For older generations who have seen time pass quickly and relationships grow distant, this is a gentle reminder. Sometimes, reaching out, whether to ask for forgiveness or to offer it, can change everything. Life gives us many chances to begin again, even if not from the start, then from where we are now, because sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we're still brave enough to say: forgive, love, begin.